over the island, Diane.
Yes, yes, very true.
Okay.
So we started to record.
Yes,
Oh,
we have.
well,
We
welcome,
started to record.
people.
I was wondering why there were so few of us.
Yeah, nice to see you. Did we get the announcements out pretty well? Posters and things like that, or was it difficult to get it out?
Well, I put up my two. I don't think other people took the posters and put them up anywhere unless someone
I put
did.
up a couple. I put up
Did
one.
you?
Yeah, I put one up at Granny's and one at IGA or IGA. I wanted to put one up at next to Pure, but they've taken down that option there. So I but IGA has a nice place with their posters and
Somebody gave me a poster. I could take it to Burton Coffee Stand and Minglement because I make deliveries there already.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I put them for everybody at Luna Cafe. I sent
Yeah.
an email out to everybody about picking them up and
Oh,
taking
I
them.
see that. Sorry. Okay.
Well, I just photocopied my own because I didn't think that you should have to bear the expense. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't mind bearing the expense if people will use.
Diane, you're freezing.
I just had a nice little light flicker here, so there may be electricity or service disruption. I'm on the north end as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, Diane, you're frozen.
Well, maybe give it a few more moments before we
Mhm.
do our welcome.
Sure, a few more minutes. Well, thank you, folks, for coming and participating in the community council. We're going to start our meeting in a few minutes here. I see Patrick Hines, King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Patrick, are you an Islander? Guess you can't.
Good evening, everybody. I actually am an Islander. I'm joining because I am interested, and also Erik Olson with Washington Fish and Wildlife asked me to sit in on his comments, so I'm here for that.
Great. We were just talking about the fact that you're an Islander and that you deal with fish and wildlife issues. So it's really good to have you at this meeting. So, and thanks for joining us. Hope you join us, again in the future.
Always happy to be here. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Good. Great. Okay, we're kind of hovering at about 15, 16 people. We don't quite have a quorum yet, but on the other hand, we don't need a quorum for most of the things that are on the agenda. So at this point, I'd like to welcome people to the May 16th, 2022 meeting of the Vashon-Maury Island Community Council. And like to hand the mic over to Nick Simmons, who can explain the Zoom technical issues that might arise in a meeting like this.
Hopefully everybody's at least passing familiar with Zoom. We've been in this pandemic for a minute now. The easy ones are, please keep yourself muted. I'll be muting people as they join. So in order to speak, you will have to unmute yourself. If you join via phone, which no one has, it looks like today, you have to press *6 to unmute yourself if you're dialing in. And if you would like recognition from the chair, depending on how you're accessing this meeting, there is either a button called reactions that allows you to raise your hand, or there's a raise hand button. And that'll kind of put your name up at the top of the list, and you will be called on in the order that your hand goes up. I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And like to tell people that the Democratic Rules of Order is the, I guess, the set of rules that we go by in these meetings, and they're posted on the chat. So Diane had a power outage and she's back now. Welcome back, Diane.
Thank you.
And at this point, I'd like to go over the agenda. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the published agenda? And if you have if you want to make a comment, you just, as Nick probably just said, you go to the function where it says reactions and you do raise hand, and so I'll show you what that's like. And then when you are done with your comment, you should lower your hand so it doesn't look like you have another comment. Okay. Well, seeing no hands raised vis-a-vis the agenda, I will adopt the agenda as it's been circulated. And the minutes from last meeting have also been sent out. And is there anyone amongst us who has any additions, changes, corrections that they'd like to make to the minutes from last month's general meeting? Diane, yes.
Yes. While I was gone, did we have a quorum and start the meeting? But we don't have a quorum now.
We don't have a quorum yet, but we're
we
not
can't
voting
really
on
make-
anything.
Well, we are. We're voting on minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose
I don't think we can do that.
I suppose we can head back to that, but I don't think that is something that we're going to need a quorum to really adopt the minutes from last month. In any event, oh, I see some special guests. Jacob Johnson, our new fearless leader of Vashon household. You are very welcome, Jason. My understanding is that you're extremely capable, and it's a position that requires someone with your skills. So, you know, it's just great to have you on board.
Well, thank you, David. Really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me join you. I think I'm in June going to be joining the Affordable Housing Committee and do a more formal introduction to this body, but good to be with you tonight.
Well, that's great. And thank you. And I don't know if you know the history, but the Vashon household was a committee of the community council originally, and it spun off and took wings and became its own organization. And so now, you know, we've come full circle and you're going to be joining our committee. And, you know, it's just such an important function that you serve, and you've been doing it well. It's tough to provide a lot of affordable housing on the island, given all the constraints. And I know that we are, you know, our committee, we were looking at the idea of perhaps even joining forces with the land trust so that we can do community land trusts as a means for keeping affordable housing in the Rose Ballin model. Okay,
That's great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity within land trust, trusting of the land, and would love to talk more about that. I think, we're really proud of what we've been able to develop on land trust at Rose Ballin, as well as Sunflower. Beautiful communities, and also offer important level of affordability for those homeowners. So would be, thrilled to talk more about what's possible.
well, great. And on the political end of it, I hear you have some experience there as well. And so we will need to work the county, but I know that the county is very receptive to these ideas. So, okay.
Yeah, most definitely. And, I think relationships make the work happen. And so hoping to build relationships with you as well as our elected leaders to get some stuff done. Really excited to be in this role and to be with you.
Well, great. Thank you again. And let's see. Is Major Mark Konoske here from the Sheriff's Office? Do I see? No.
No,
Hadley Rodero is, I know that he was going to join the meeting a little bit later when his presentation was going to start. And then I saw Sergeant Erik Olson is here from Fish and Wildlife, and thank you very much for joining us. And we also have Patrick Hines, who is not really a guest technically because he's an islander, but he's a member of the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And it's my understanding he has particular expertise regarding enforcement of fish and wildlife issues. Okay, and we have Bong Santo Domingo here, who is our liaison with the county. Welcome, Bong. And okay, so Major Mark Konoske, is there that's really a shame if we don't have our sheriff's representative for this meeting, because we were going to be discussing fireworks enforcement. Bong, is there any way you could get a message out to Major Konoske? Okay. And what we may want to do then is, skip that presentation and go to Hadley Rodero, but I don't think Hadley's going to be here till 7:30. So in that case, given that we flexibility is key to these community groups, we do have Erik Olson who's present. We do have Patrick Hines. Perhaps this would be an opportunity to go forward to discuss the shellfish issue and then segue back to hear the fireworks ban enforcement and also the Washington State Ferries presentation. Erik, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Sorry, I'm in my patrol truck here, so
That's absolutely fine.
sitting on the passenger side is a little more comfortable. So instead of having to lean across the middle console here. Well, I appreciate the invite. My name's Erik Olson. I'm a sergeant with State Fish and Wildlife. Been a sergeant for about 10 years. And I supervise what they call the Central Puget Sound Marine Detachment. And essentially what that is from about the Narrows Bridge north to the north end of Camino Island is my area of responsibility. I have 6 officers for that area, and it's a lot of work. And specific to Vashon, it's, obviously we get a lot of calls, so we spend a lot of time out there. Some of which, frankly, is spent in the middle of the night, as Mr. Hines will tell you. I've stopped by his house many times in the middle of the night out there. It's, and I understand that there's, a lot of frustration sometimes because, frankly, we don't have anyone that lives on the island. Any officers, I mean. Oh, I'm sorry. So we don't have anyone that actually lives on the island. So obviously we're dependent on, the ferries. Okay. And also we try to time some of our patrols with some of those really low extreme tides that we know is probably going to get a lot of folks there, especially in the middle of the summer. And that's, and I am familiar with a number of the issues that are out there. And there's just some limitations to what we can do. And I wanted to talk about some of those limitations, as well as some of the things that possibly we can do and some plans going forward. And so that's what I kind of wanted to talk about now. And I didn't know if you wanted me to go into that, Mr. Vogel, or do you want me to kind of open up for questions first and then kind of go into
I think going into it first and then opening up questions would be great. If I can get you up to speed, we had a meeting some months ago where the issue was blocking public access on the public right-of-ways to the beaches. That when you have a road end, these road ends create public access to the water. And there are some people who don't like that and who have taken actions to prevent access, which is not allowed. And then the reaction from the landowners was, well, I've got all these people coming out on my property, taking my shellfish, and that should not be allowed. And they shouldn't be allowed to come out to the, to the shoreline, even though my property is not on this direct access. That's how they get there. So I think you could probably address that in your presentation as well.
So are you saying that that someone's blocking like a roadway, or is it like a public access area? You're saying they're blocking so people can't get through there?
Yeah, there are some people, what they wanted to do in particular was they wanted to vacate that roadway, that right of way, and have the county actually vacate it, which is not something that they have done in recent history. But there was an application for a vacation of that easement.
Okay, that have to be something that the King County Sheriffs would have to talk about. I can't really speak to that
sure.
piece, but I can certainly speak to the second part of that.
Sure.
Yeah, and obviously, oh, sorry, is someone talking? No, so obviously, someone cannot dig on your property unless you have given them permission to do so. Okay. Our problem with some of these areas is, first of all, the access areas. We don't own any of these access areas. Some are, I think one of them is owned by DNR. I think another one, I'm not 100% certain about that. I think one is owned by the county as well, like you're talking about. And what we have an issue with is the fact that we can't really, it's difficult to enforce who's on what property if the instruments that we rely upon to tell us what it is, where someone's at and whether or not they're breaking the law is not reliable. And what I'm getting at is the fact that when we're making a contact, so say we're out doing, a hunting check or something, and somebody's on the wrong GMU, we're going to look at where we are at with our GPS, and we're going to go, oh, here it is. And this is the map for the GMU. And here it is. And we have those downloaded on our phones, and it's pretty nice. So with property lines, what we rely upon is the Onyx map with the county assessor's webpage. That's the only thing I have to tell me, okay, who is this? Whose property is this? And then I'm going to go and contact, because more than likely I'm called out there anyway. So I'm going to go and talk to that homeowner. I'm going to say, did you give this guy permission? And I'm going to go from there. If I'm looking on this map and it's showing that, frankly, no one owns it. I'm not saying that you don't own it or someone doesn't own it. I'm saying that the Onyx map that I'm using through the assessor's webpage is showing that no one owns it. Even though I'm sure people have deeds and everything that say, yeah, I do own it. Here it is. My problem is, from a legal standpoint, I'm not left with a lot of options. And it creates this weird, creates a situation that I am certainly not happy with. Okay. However, I have some hurdles I have to jump through and some proof that I have to reach in order to cite people. Now,
Okay.
yeah, and that it's a lot easier when I have a giant fence and I go, this guy hopped over the fence, that guy's in this guy's yard. Well, that's an easy one. I'm like, boom, let's grab him. Okay. With this, I don't want people to think, because I think there's been a lot of frustration. And frankly, if I owned property that someone was digging on, I'd have a tremendous amount of frustration with that. So I want everyone to keep calling us, because we are going to keep coming and trying to address it. And we've been putting a lot of resources towards it. I mean, we're required to do a certain amount of patrols out on Vashon Island anyway, just through what's called the NSSP. It's the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. And I'm required to do a number of patrols out there because of the tidelands, some of the harvests that can take place out there, especially even commercial harvests. And so then there's the piece of, and we can go back to some of these if anyone has any questions. Okay. But then there's the piece of some of the activities that I continue to hear about through these access areas. And some of those activities are a little concerning to me. The lack of restrooms, and from what I've been told, some of the folks that are visiting these access areas because they just need to go to the bathroom are just going to the bathroom somewhere else, right? Out on that beach or whatever. I've heard some really rather disturbing things about where some people are using the restroom out there. And one of the things that I talked about with my officers is I'm trying to reach out to those people, that the entities that own those access points, and at least put some porta potties out there for that. To me, it seems like if you're going to have an access area that is being heavily used as a government agency, that you need to deal with the people that are going to be out there.
We'd like to encourage that.
And
No,
I'm
that's
just telling you, that's something that I'm working on.
good.
Okay. And
Good.
I think we're going to have some traction with that, especially with the amount of, I can't promise anything because I don't own the property. If our agency owned it, I'd feel really confident about going, hey, we're going to have something out there. But when I'm relying upon other entities to do it for me, that creates some problems sometimes. There's a little more red tape, but it's not anything that certainly not impossible to work through. And so we are working on that piece.
Okay.
And because that one was really pretty, I'd be really irritated if my family was out of my house and somebody's out there doing something. Okay. So I get that piece. And then some of the other issues, I'm trying to remember, I had a list. It was, I know there's been, hold on, excuse me. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the public trust doctrine. And that's something that I've only recently really been given quite the, education on. It's been a crash course, so to speak,
Okay.
which talks about how if certainly probably Patrick Hines can speak probably with a little more detail on this, not to put him on the spot, but essentially would allow someone to walk through if your tidelands, okay, someone's walking down the beach, they can walk over your tidelands, okay? Can't stop and dig, none of that, okay? That's not anything. It just has to do with accessibility on the water, okay, for the tidelands. That's what the Attorney General's office has told us. And so that's just one piece that I think everyone should know. Tidelands are just strange because it's not like you have a bunch of fences up, right? Now you can actually post some of the tidelands, okay? Meaning you can put little stakes in the ground, okay? It's actually written in Washington Administrative Code that you can do that. You can't put anything in there that's going to, harm, sea life or anything like that, which I guess just means it has to be made out of some kind of wood or something. I don't really know. All I know is that you can mark your tidelands. However, it's illegal to improperly mark your tidelands. So basically some kind of land claim, right? That you haven't proven that you actually own it. What I mean by that is people that stake out things that maybe, like I said, some of the restrictions I have about the county assessor's webpage, stuff like that. If I can't show, even if you haven't marked, say, because you believe maybe you'll own to mean low tide. I don't doubt it at all. Okay. But unless, like I said, it shows up on that Onyx map site, I can't enforce it, even if you had it marked. Okay.
I see that Nick has a question, and he's had his hand up for a while. If you don't mind me asking, Nick.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at the hand.
Oh, hey, not a problem. That's my job. Yeah.
No trouble. Hey, thanks for coming out. So the Onyx map is based on the King County GIS data, I imagine, which is connected to the assessor's office, and they all, it's kind of the central hub for all geographic information in King County is this GIS system. So that system is, just so folks know, accessible to the public at King County IMAP, and I'll put a link to that in the chat so you can look at that. In particular, if you look along Burton Beach, which is where a lot of these problems are, so that's Vashon Highway, right? You're coming into Burton there, right? So there's a whole list of parcels there that on their deeds say that they owe out to mean low, or in some cases they own out to extreme low tide. But the parcel viewer, the map itself doesn't show that, right? So that whole shoreline on the other side of the highway there on the map is completely unmarked. But if you look at the website, also linked in the chat there, which is directly from that map, it shows the legal description of their lot on the King County Assessor's website. So in the case of, for example, Bill Rowling, who came to us with this shellfish problem, on the website, his parcel is described as a bunch of legalese. And then at the very end of it, it says Old Strand Road and TGW Tidelands adjacent to mean low tide. So that's on the website in the assessors. Is that enough for you to have sufficient legal standing? I see some heads shaking.
Yeah, it creates, so the problem with that is that's so ambiguous, right? Where's mean low tide? I mean, if it's marked, there's some kind of again, it's like, I want to do this stuff, right? I mean, I see that and I just go, well, where's mean low tide? And then trying to prove that or explain that to a prosecutor too. I mean, these aren't, just to let you guys know that, oh, hey, Patrick Hines has his hand up. I don't know.
Okay.
He'd be the guy to answer legal questions, right?
Patrick, if you, and next I'll call Catherine, but if you could weigh in on that issue.
Sorry, Catherine, I didn't mean to jump on it there.
Just to expand on Eric's point, hi, everybody, just really quickly. My name is Patrick Hines. I'm with the King County Prosecutor's Office. I am the chair of what we call our Economic Crimes Unit. So the attorneys that I manage would prosecute any felony level fish or shellfish crimes. Misdemeanor level fish and shellfish crimes would go to our district court unit that is managed by a man named James Daniels. He's not available today, so I'm sort of speaking for both of us, or participating for both of us. To go to Erik's point, because it is something that he and I have talked about, the issue that we see, number one, I would encourage everyone to sort of step back and shake their heads vigorously like an Etch-a-Sketch, because that's often what you need to do to get into the mode of thinking like a lawyer, which is what I have to do when we get these cases. And one of the foundational principles is it doesn't matter what I know, it matters what I can prove. And what matters is what I can prove, not just in general, but with admissible evidence. The issue that people like Erik are going to have is that when they go out on the tidelands, yes, most property descriptions for waterfront say down to, mean low tide, or sometimes even extreme low tide. But when you're standing out on a beach, where is that spot? Because, and even the legal description of property will say things like it's X number of feet from this marker. And that's requiring a lot, and probably an unfeasible amount from an officer standing there when they're trying to determine or sort of enforce these boundary issues, where if someone's one step on this side of the line, what they're doing actually isn't illegal. If they're on this side, it is illegal. I think there is a lot of work that could be done, but I think it's really going to come down to either figuring out some way to have GPS location data for where that line is, because otherwise someone in Erik or his crew spot are in an almost impossible position when they're actually standing there trying to de-escalate one of these situations. So that's the issue that they're running into. And I can certainly understand it, because when he calls me and says, hey, we just arrested somebody, I'm going to have some questions that are pretty much along those lines, because I have to prove what side of that line they were on at the time that they were fishing or digging.
And Patrick, is the mens rea for this crime knowledge? So would they have to know that they are trespassing?
I got a little bit aggressive about muting myself and then couldn't get back to it.
Okay.
Most of these actually don't necessarily have a mens rea. You don't have to know for a lot of them.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to tell you, because everything I'm going to say, because I'm a lawyer and a trial lawyer, really the answer I'm first going to give you is it depends. And then I'll try and answer the question as best as I can. The way the statute is written, there usually is not a mens rea. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, basically what mental state does the person have to have? Do they have to know that they were on the wrong side of the land? The way the statute is written, usually not, but in King County in particular and the state in general, those are highly disfavored rules. And so we usually feel much safer proving that it's a knowing violation. But where we are on this is actually not just proving that they knew that they were on the wrong side of the line, but actually proving that they were in fact on the wrong side of the line. Because I have to, that is something that I do have to prove in order to charge someone with criminal trespassing or any of the other crimes that we could. I have to show that they actually were trespassing. I have to know where the line is so I can show which side of it they were on.
Okay. Thank you. Catherine, you had a question.
Yes, thank you very much. And
Sure.
Thank you, Sergeant Olson, for being on this evening. Really appreciate the hard work that you do. So this issue of whether or not people are on the right side or the wrong side, whether trespassing, I think is one issue. I have a question around just general enforcement of the people don't often cover up their holes. And it's my understanding that they're supposed to be doing that. And I don't know whether that's an education issue or whether it's just like what the issue is there. Like, do people need to be educated about it? Because when I've gone out and talked to people, they're very nice about it, and I ask them to cover up their holes. So one issue is just their cleanup afterwards, whether they're leaving garbage is one thing, but also cleaning up the holes and being good stewards of the area. And then the second issue is, do all of these people really have licenses, or are they just allowed to go out? Because if they're supposed to have licenses, I guess I would take two steps back and like, okay, are they really allowed to be out there in that many numbers doing what they're doing? So anyway, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so the license piece is easy to answer there on that. If you're 15 years or old or over, you have to have a license to participate in that activity. Now, lot of times, as you probably seen, there's a lot of kids though, right? They don't need a license. They still have to adhere to a limit, but some people bring their kids, and it's kind of hard to try to figure out, are they participating or not? And the reason I use my air quotes here is because that's what the RCW says. That's what the state law says. They have to participate. Now, what's participating, right? So to answer your question, yes, they have to have a license if they're 15 or over. Now, the holes, to me, that's something that people should be doing. I know it's a bigger issue on the coast. They require to fill in holes on the coast, and then in the Puget Sound too. It's just, that is something that I talk to people too about, especially for when they're digging gooey duck, right? Because those holes get pretty dang big. I mean, I think we've all seen the people that dig a hole so deep chasing the gooey duck that they can put half their body into it. So these are significant issues that, I mean, we address when we're out there with them. Absolutely. It's just sometimes, some of these limits, especially when they have big families and stuff out, you can have 3 gooey duck. Well, some of the gooey duck get pretty big, right? And when you have a whole family, maybe you have a family like 6 or 7, that's going to look like tremendous amount of gooey duck. And then what about like, manila clams or something like that? Each one can have 40. That's a massive amount when you're talking about a group of 10 people or something. So, when we get the calls and we go out there, we do all these operations. I mean, because believe it or not, I've done, not to give up too many trade secrets here, but we do a lot of stuff too at night on Vashon, especially when you guys used to have that Tramp Harbor pier.
For squid?
Yes. Squidding is just, it's dampened down a lot without that pier there, or access to it rather. But people still go over there. They just go over by boat, or they go and launch a little skiff from shore or something like that. Still see that, but we work a number of operations. Believe it or not, we even work deer decoys on Vashon. You just don't necessarily hear about it because sometimes when you advertise things, you're not going to get the desired result. Maybe if someone's going to go out and poach, right? But those are things that we do a lot of times at night too, just in the cover of darkness, because that's when the bad guys are out. So that's when we try to catch a large portion of them. The ones that we're talking about here are more the overt, right? The guys, the people are just going out and just covering the beaches with families and maybe friends and possibly unlicensed people, and we want to get those calls, believe it or not, because it may not be illegal what they're doing, but I always want to know. I never discourage anyone to not call. And the reason why is because it helps direct my activity for the day.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks.
Diane, Emerson, you have a question.
Yes, I was wondering if you could put the phone number in the chat that people should call. Who do we call?
It's what we call our Wildcom number. It's our, and I can grab it for you right now and get it off the
Or just
internet.
tell us, or write it down, whatever.
Yeah, here I'll frankly, I should have it memorized and I don't. So I have to Google it just like everyone else here. So give me a second. I have some back channel phone numbers, but our dispatchers would be very mad if I gave that out.
No, give us
So-
the one that they want.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. Okay, here we go. Okay, here it is. It's and maybe someone can type it into
I'll type it in. I'm
Okay.
already.
It's 360-902-2936.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, like I said, I should have that memorized. I just don't. And what were some of the questions there? I don't know how to get to that on here.
I'm happy to read them from the chat.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not used to Zoom. I'm used to Teams. That's what I use at work. So
Greg asks, do you know if the majority of poaching on Vashon is for recreational or commercial consumption?
So we've always wanted to, the short answer is recreational. Okay. But anytime someone's getting large quantities of stuff, we're always doing a little more of an investigation to determine if it's someone harvesting product that may be being sold commercially because of the quantity, right? I mean, I remember the last operation we did down there with the squid. I mean, we had hundreds of pounds of squid. And so my brain immediately goes to, this has got to be commercial. This guy's got to be trying to sell this. Who's going to eat that much, right? And that's where I start talking to Mr. Hines there and stuff, and we start working through some other issues. But everyone, if they are working in a commercial capacity, it's through the guise of a recreational fishery.
Okay. Is there any requirement for enforcing red tides? Because we have that, and it's dangerous to eat what a lot of people are harvesting.
It is, and that's so the problem with the red tides is that it's an advisory closure, right?
Okay.
And we put it out there. Trust me, I have a lot of conversations with Department of Health when we're trying to work through this, and it's an advisory closure. And the only ones that we have the authority, I guess, to close down are ones that are listed within. We have a particular Washington administrative code that lists out all these beaches that we have the authority to close down. We can, have a season on. We can, if there's a toxin issue, we can shut them down. But primarily that's some public areas, and it's not all public areas. I can tell you that right now. It's not all, but it's mostly like parks, some parks, not all. It's kind of odd. Most of them are within that. Most of those areas, though, that I'm talking about are on the east shore of the Puget Sound from like Des Moines north. So, but the red tide one, primarily an advisory closure, and we can't enforce it other than for commercial. If there's a commercial fishery, then absolutely, that's a whole different deal.
Okay. All right. Do we have other questions for Sergeant Olson at this point?
What was the
Nick?
question here from Catherine? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't get to read it. What did it say?
How far out do people's properties extend in terms of ownership? I.e., no, different question.
Yeah, it's a different question. I just said that.
Oh, okay.
Given the issue with Vashon being accessible only by ferry, it makes calling you and your ability to get here kind of challenging. And I just was wondering if it's possible, since most of the activity happens during the weekends. It was actually worse during the pandemic when a day was a weekend and a weekend when there was no difference between the days. But is it possible to just get a few officers to come out a few weekend days to, I'm just as a suggestion, I don't know if this is what you're able to do, to, for instance, check licenses at the access points. That might scare people off. Just trying to think about a way to be more preemptive about things, because I appreciate your answer about the licenses. I do hypothesize if everybody really has a license or not, and just if there were more enforcement at certain times, that might scare people off. And then to your point about the red tides, I think if they're selling this stuff, I don't think they care where it ends up. But at any rate, thank you.
No, those are some good points, Catherine. I can tell you right now that, well, let me just explain one thing about the amount of manpower that we have right now. I told you how many officers I have in my detachment, but I explained the area that covers, right? It's an extremely large area. And the good news is, though, is that the governor's budget continues to give us more and more officers. the governor's budget is actually very, very favorable to fish and wildlife enforcement. And it has to do with a lot of the, I think he calls it the salmon package, or the salmon bill, because we're doing a lot of protection for the ESA listed salmon, and also ESA listed SRKWs, Southern Resident Killer Whales. And so we are getting a lot of funding there. The problem is that it takes so long to both recruit, hire an officer, and then you have to do training, and then that training has to consist of the basic law enforcement academy, right? We all have to go to the basic law enforcement academy because we all have that police authority, and that's a requirement to do our job. The problem, though, is that the basic law enforcement academy can only take so many people a year. So we literally had to turn away funding because we can only plan out for 2 years, because that's how long the state budget is, for a 2-year period. So if during that 2-year period we can't reassure the legislature that, hey, we can have this many people, boots on the ground in 2 years. If we can't do that, then we really can't take the funding in good faith. So the good news is just today alone, I ended up going down, and I was down in Olympia today. I actually pulled over into Seattle here just to do this call, but I was down in Olympia today, training a bunch of new recruits for some, just through what we call an in-house academy. And there were 5 of them, and we are hiring as many folks as we can. But it's just that time frame that it's just going to take time. And I just ask to please be patient, because we are going to get more officers, and we will have more help, and we will have more officers capable of working more weekend days. I think, especially during the summertime. Okay. That's going to be, because that's that, you have the low tides at night during the winter, but a lot of times, because you guys are accessible via ferry, that contradicts with the ferry runs sometimes, depending on that time frame. So really, we're talking about more certain times of the year during the summer, where it's the extreme low tide, where you get these giant groups of people that go out there. And I can tell you this, that those dates, according to the tide chart, are in our detachment calendar. Okay, so we are trying to get out there, but sometimes things come out at the last minute. And it seems like that is the standard these days, is that you start calling a service going, yep, I'm going to go out to Vashon. And then all of a sudden I get these calls for SRKW issues, or, and it just gets very problematic. And all I say is that it is getting better. And we just need a little more time to bring on more officers. And we're going to get those additional officers. The chief has made it very clear. And he is pushing hard with Olympia to end the basic law enforcement academy, to get those people trained up so we can get them out there. It's very difficult right now. That's all I say.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sergeant Olson, for coming out and joining us. I know the ferry ride's kind of tough. Maybe you have to rush home, catch the boat. But back in the old days, Vashon historically was known for self-help and for meeting folks like this at the ferry with pitchforks. But you were kind of trying to discourage that approach.
Okay, I can take it. It's fine. I'm used to that for a living. It's fine. Okay. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone's patience. Frankly, I wish we had an officer actually that lived out on Vashon. I know for King County Sheriff's had that for a number of years.
Yeah.
He just retired not too long ago, though, right? Like a year ago or something. I can't remember that gentleman's name. But yeah, I wish we did. I just don't think that's a possibility. But more officers will help that. And frankly, we also, I've gone out there too, just on a patrol boat too, just to get guys offshore and drop people off, especially at that Burton area. We had a we actually got a call there, was it last week, I think, or something, that there was a large group of people there. It turned out to be the tribe had a kind of a ceremonial deal out there. So turned out to kind of be a nothing deal, but it looked pretty intimidating when you're like, holy crap, there's like 50 people here. So
Yeah.
yes, Kurt Lyson, that's it. Yes.
Now, isn't Kurt Lyson the owner of the red bike that got stuck in the tree? No, no, that's just apocryphal, right? Okay. All right.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I just have to say thank you to Patrick Hines and Patrick. I've known Patrick a very long time, and he is no offense, Mr. Vogel, but he is the best lawyer I've ever met. One of the smartest men that I've ever met in my life.
Well,
So,
that's good to hear.
yes, he is. He is.
This means Erik needs a favor, is what this really means.
Need those charges filed, Patrick. Come on, no, he is one of the best legal minds when it comes to fish and wildlife stuff that I've ever met. So that's no joke. So
Well, great. Good to hear.
no
Well,
problem.
thank you. And thank you also, Patrick, for joining our meeting. And we hope you come more often. It's really good to have you here. And I see that Major Mark Konoske has, and correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, Major, he's joined us to talk about enforcement of the fireworks ban. I also see we have folks from the state ferries. So if you folks can be patient, we're going to go through talking about the fireworks ban because that was first on our agenda. Okay. Major Konoske.
First off, my apologies. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Apologize for getting here late, had something come up. I'm glad to be here though. And first off, I need to comment on Kyle and your cat. Is that a cat on your shoulder? Yeah, nice. All right, so fireworks. I'll just give you the general on it and how we do it each year. Prior to the 4th of July particularly, usually there's a review of the weather and terrain, if you will, or the dryness. And there is the option of the executive, if in consultation with the fire marshal, that it's just too risky for anything, he can limit or stop fireworks. That's for the 4th of July. That's a very rare occasion. In Washington State, if it's aerial of any type, it's illegal. Obviously, things that arbitrarily explode are illegal. In unincorporated King County on July 4th from 9 a.m. to midnight, fireworks that are legally sold in Washington can be ignited. So that's the general with what's legal, what's not. A lot of our cities in King County have their own ordinances that either are more flexible or open or more restrictive through their ordinances. When it comes to enforcement, as long as when we get a call that it's not an abstract fire hazard or danger to human life or anything like that, officers will go out, and if it doesn't fit the King County ordinance for legality, oftentimes there's a warning, but it's really situation dependent. But generally, warning, shut it down, put your stuff away. But if we get called back a second time, we'll generally look at minimum seizing or citing the person for the applicable law. So we try to use a reasonable approach, but we also understand how fireworks affect animals, fire hazards, physical safety, and things of that nature. So that's a general.
I see we have a question, if I can interrupt you, Major.
Oh, yeah.
It's from someone designated iPhone. Who is the person on iPhone?
That's me, Mika, sorry.
Oh, okay. Hi, Mika.
Yeah, I could wait till he was done. I
Oh,
just-
okay.
Yeah, I could wait till he's done.
Okay.
That's a good place to stop if you'd like to ask.
Okay, so are we going to be having the public fireworks on the island this year?
That I don't know. Generally, that goes through a permitting process of some type. And I haven't, usually when it comes to like parades or block parties or something like that, I'm one of the stops out of many that reviews it and gives recommendations. So I haven't seen anything yet.
And may I ask one more question? Are you only going to be speaking on fireworks today? Or are you going to be touching on the crime on Vashon that has escalated?
I would love to talk about the crime. If you want to tell me which part is concerning to you.
Okay.
We can obviously talk about it. I also have some resources that are coming up for us to do better, more targeted enforcement when we have a series of things going on. But which crime are you referring to?
Well, I was last month, I was burglarized. My business was burglarized. Person who, so there's only a few burglaries that have happened on island. One in particular, like the flower shop, they had the painting of Black Lives Matters, the painting of people who were shot. Those were vandalized. The paintings of other Black people shot, those were vandalized. And my shop, I am a minority owned business, was burglarized to an extent that the police officer that came in to do the report was shocked. He was like, this was personal. And we got the person on video. This person, if you look at his Facebook page, has very racist rants and raves, and he's walking around. And every time he's, I'm like, oh, this person is over there. Well, first of all, I can never get through to add anything to my report. By the time I go through 4 transfers, right when I connect, my phone call is disconnected. I've called like 5 times, had to wait 40 minutes, and I can never get through to add, to find out what the status of the crime is. And it seems like they're saying, well, this is a burglary. We have more precedent things. But in my opinion, it was more than a burglary. And not just in my opinion, on many of the minorities on the island, based on looking at this person's Facebook page, it was much more than just a random burglary. This is a person, one individual who did it and did it with such hate and such destruction. Because he didn't write the N-word doesn't mean anything. The shooter in, Buffalo, New York didn't write the N-word before he shot up the crowd. He just did it, So I'm wondering what do we don't want to become the island. I know there's a lot of break-ins too. There's a lot of break-ins, and it's the same people. We can't just keep slapping them on the hand. I mean, there needs to be repercussions, and what can be done.
Okay, so with our role, we're just a slice of the criminal justice pie.
Right.
What I can do is I just threw up my email. Why don't you send me, if you have a case number,
I do.
any other particulars, just email to me, and I can, for your specific issue, I can look into it and get either myself or someone back in touch with you if you need to add stuff to the case or a status update or something like that.
Yeah, it was like
that's not a problem.
It was pretty significant.
That's great. Yeah, it showed a lot of hatred.
It did.
The actions that were taken.
And if you look at his Facebook post, he talks about Nazis rule and things like that. And for people to say it wasn't a hate crime, look at his Facebook pages. They're definitely very racist.
Okay. When it comes to slaps on the wrist and whatnot, when we develop probable cause for a suspect, we write it up in our appropriate reports, and then we send it to the prosecutor's office for prosecution. So I can address the issues of responding to, investigating, and then if we have probable cause at the time, arresting someone, and if not, pursuing it until the leads go cold or we develop something. That's the component I can address. When it comes to when we do send charges to the prosecutor, I can tell you right now in King County, I'd have to contact the prosecutor's office and find out what their filing standards are. Their filing standards for property crimes has gone so high that, and I'm not throwing them under the bus, they're overworked and all that. But for their reasons, and I can't speak to them, a lot of our property crimes don't get prosecuted. So that'd be something to bring up with the prosecutor's office. Hey, I'm a business owner and got all the things that you told me.
Yeah.
So that's the component that's out of my control. But
Right.
within
I
my
under-
control is investigating and locating and identifying folks.
And I appreciate that. I have a son who's a sheriff. I have the utmost respect for the office. And I know there's challenges, but I think it's like a cancer that spreads if you don't nip it in the bud. And I understand the budget cuts and all that thing. So I know it's frustrating, but I will email you the case number. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I can get back to you within the week.
All right. Thank you.
Well, now, Major, wasn't there a legislative move by King County to expand the ban on fireworks? in
They're like-
unincorporated-
Sorry to interrupt.
Well,
There
wasn't,
likely
ahead.
is- There likely is. What's interesting is that we generally, if there's a legislative action that requires some type of either code enforcement or criminal enforcement, civil infractions, we're generally within King County, the entity that does enforcement. So that information is sent to us, internal within the King County Sheriff's Office. We send out policy on what we're going to do this particular season or if the laws have changed. So generally, that information is disseminated within the Sheriff's Office, usually in June, in anticipation of the 4th of July. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's not so much a once a year, it's the one time a year where it's very prevalent, right? So you can have fireworks at other times of the year that are illegal. But yeah, if there is, we're part of the legislative branch. They just slide it over to us and then we disseminate it throughout the department, and I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, yes, Diane Emerson just posted in the chat, starting next year, sale and use of consumer fireworks in an unincorporated county will be prohibited as of May 7th, 2021. The ban goes into effect during the 4th of July fireworks season.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll adapt to. Every year there's changing laws, whether it's local ordinances or state law. So yeah, if that becomes the case, then enforcement becomes tighter. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Major, are you going to be coming to our meetings on a regular basis, or will someone else from the office be coming to our meetings?
Well, I'm so new, I'm getting used to the different meetings. Can you tell me what the frequency of this meeting is?
Well, our meeting is every month, but we ask for a report from the sheriff's office every other month.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best to make it. It would be nice. I don't know who the organizers, can someone send a recurring calendar appointment? Do we do that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and if for whatever reason I can't respond, I will send a reason why back to whoever the organizer is. And if it's a hot topic for you, I will have my captain, Heather Volpe, or one of the sergeants drop in on the meeting.
Okay.
You guys are important. I try to be everywhere at once. Sometimes I can't.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And, we'll see you again, hopefully in another 2 months.
Yeah, maybe I'll get out to Island at some point.
That would be even better.
Yeah.
Okay. So
All
let
right.
us know.
Thank
We
you.
could show you the rounds.
It's been a
Okay.
long time since I've been out there.
Well, good. You do come out because you'll enjoy it. I see Greg he's just clapping. Great. Now, moving on, before we go on to Washington State Ferries, I would like to give credit where credit is due. And at last month's meeting, I pretty much called out the rural area group from the county, saying that our request to get trash cans for the uptown area on Vashon, that they had just basically kicked the can down the road. Well, I have a report now from Bong Santo Domingo that local services, the agency responsible for rural areas, has a budget of $10,000 to purchase 9 litter cans for Vashon Island, which was exactly what we had requested. And we are now developing a contract with Uplift Northwest formerly the Millionaires Club, which we anticipate signing in June, and work is anticipated to begin in July. So we have had a response to our requests, and thank you very much, Bong. And when we see the folks from local services, we'll also thank them. Okay, thanks very much for the information. So next on our agenda, or sort of next, but coming next now, Strategic Communications Manager Hadley Rodero is here from Washington State Ferries, and we were going to get a report on what's going on with the ferries. I believe this is also going to be addressing the Fauntleroy dock repairs, correct?
Yes, thanks, David.
Okay.
We are here, well, really only to talk about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. So joining me is David Sowers, who's the Director of Terminal Engineering for Washington State Ferries, and his department is responsible for the planning for the new ferry terminal in Fauntleroy. I'm happy to hear any other questions about ferries, and we can do our best to answer them, but most likely we'll need to go back and get those answers from others. I also see that Rachel Rome is on. She's our Ferry Advisory Committee member from Vashon. And Rachel, if you hear anything that you want to answer, feel free to chime in. Thanks for being here. So if you're ready for us, I can just share my screen and jump right in with a quick presentation. And we'll take questions whenever you're ready. It looks like I need permission to share.
Oh, let's see. Or I guess that's
You should be good to go, Hadley.
Nick. Yeah.
Yep. Try it again.
Okay. There we go.
Great.
You're seeing that? Is everyone seeing the title slide of the presentation?
Yeah.
That's good.
Great.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for having us. And as we mentioned, we're here to talk about our efforts that are still in the very early stages to plan for a new Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal. And we are going to run through very quickly what we've been up to lately, and then the teaser is that we're having public meetings coming up next week on the 24th and 25th. So really we're going to sort of preview information, but we hope you will all plan to attend one of our public meetings. We'll also be having an online open house launching on Wednesday, where you can see the same information and spend much more time perusing it at your own leisure. So we're not going to share a ton of details tonight, but we'll kind of preview what the issues are in our process, and then you can follow up with one of our upcoming meetings. Let's see here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, is going to do our first couple slides, and then I'll jump back in.
Yeah, thanks, Hadley. Well, I know some of this is probably a repeat for many of you, and you guys all probably know the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal better than anybody, but I want to kind of give a couple of overview slides here of what's going on out there and why the importance of the project. And one of those right off the bat is just the structural and seismic integrity of the facility. This is a dock that was built in the 50s and updated again in the 80s. It's constructed out of timber piling and a timber deck. It's showing its age. You can see in this picture on the right that some of the pilings have actually been jacketed and filled with concrete to reinforce that connection where the pile goes into the ground. And then these piling, the technology at the time was just to pound on them until they wouldn't go any further, essentially. And so they're not that deep into the beach sediments on that shoreline. So in addition to the structural integrity in a seismic event, kind of like the old viaduct, it's stable in a static situation and it can handle the traffic volumes and the traffic loading. But in a seismic event, the facility would sustain a fair amount of damage, and there's actually predictions that portions of it could actually collapse. So we're looking at it from that standpoint. We need to update this facility to meet the 21st century using steel pipe piles and concrete decking and do those types of things to make it resilient. We also are trying to address sea level rise. As you can see in this photo, the dock is extremely low in the water, and debris and storm surges have an impact on the facility and can damage the facility and the utilities underneath the dock. And then finally, obviously it goes without saying, there's a number of operational challenges with this facility, in addition to the fact that the trestle only holds about 80 cars and it serves 124 car boat. That's an issue. We have, obviously we have motorcycles and buses going the wrong way up the exit lanes between offloading. We have pedestrian conflicts with loading everybody on the transfer span. And of course, at Fauntleroy Way, we have an unsignalized intersection. So there's just so many different things that, you know, why just tackle one of these when we can try to tackle all of them? And so that's kind of the overview of the project and the things that we're trying to address. You obviously know why we're here. Just to highlight on the ridership, pre-pandemic, we had over 3 million users on this route. We're not quite back to those numbers, but we're inching closer and closer. I want to say we're up over 80%. So we're designing this facility for the next 75 to 100 years. We're not looking at a pandemic number, or we're looking at what, you know, meaning those numbers that we saw in 2019. The process that we're in is called a planning and environmental linkages study, and it's a precursor to the formal NEPA and SEPA processes that we use in concert with Federal Highways or Federal Transit Organization. We've gone through, based on input from the long range plan, we've developed a purpose and need statement, which I'll show you in a second, screening criteria, and then a list of alternatives. And so an analogy would be, if you were buying a new car, you know, what kind of criteria to use to select the car? You know, gas mileage, safety features, does it seat 4 kids and grandma? Those are kind of things, budget. Those are all things that fit into the screening criteria. So we've come up with criteria, we've come up with the community's input, a list of alternative. There's about 14 different alternatives that were considered, and we've screened down to about 9 alternatives that we are ready to move into this level 2 screening, which is a much more rigorous screening. And with that, we'll eventually arrive at a preferred alternative, which we can push then into the NEPA and SEPA process. So all along the way, we've been actively engaged with the community. You know, members on this committee and this group have been there, as well as both the Southworth community and the Fauntleroy community. Some of the screening criteria have been brought about by the community members, and certainly alternatives have been brought about by community members. So we're, similarly to the last slide, we're kind of tracking along. We've kind of graduated from this level 1 phase and weeded out those alternatives that just present too many red flags, to the point where we can get into and really start rolling up our sleeves and looking at the remaining criteria. I know there's a lot of words here, but I just want to, I highlighted a couple of them in the pictures at the beginning of the presentation. The other purposes and needs we have is to provide efficient and safe loading and fare processing for all modes of travel, and just provide that connectivity with the, you know, with the Seattle, this West Seattle side and the Southwest side, in terms of how we're hooking up with other modes of travel, and doing this all in consistent with the long range plan and the growth that's projected in that document. So again, a lot of words here. This is a revised, the criteria. I mentioned my analogy with the buying an automobile. What we had in the beginning was the unhighlighted criteria here. We talked about structural reliability, sea level rise, operations, addressing conflicting points for multiple modes. With community's input, then we added these additional highlighted screening criteria, including the ability to avoid parks and recreational areas, dealing with traffic circulation. How well does the alternative address permitting and environmental challenges, the needs for additional right-of-way? Those things all factor into a selected alternative, and we're trying to weigh those different alternatives with this criteria. So just like buying a car, you kind of weed out, maybe it's price, maybe it's the size, maybe it's the function, maybe it's the 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds that's important to you. All those things are being weighted out, and what we're going to arrive at is a preferred alternative. Let's go to the next slide. So here's where we're settling now for the 9 different alternatives. We have taken alternative dock locations out of that list, including trying to route the traffic, the ferries directly to downtown or to points south of Fauntleroy. We were looking at replacing the trestle in the same location with the same size dock or a larger dock, looking at offsite holding, just trying to, all the different variations on those basic themes. And so that's what we're now recommending to the community. And with this has all gotten feedback from our advisory groups, the technical advisory group, the community advisory group, and then as well as our executive advisory group to take these alternatives forward to level 2.
Okay, so we're going to get into a little more detail on this screening. So across the top, you can see the list of alternatives that Dave was just mentioning. These are all options that at one point or another have been suggested by members of the community or stakeholders that we should consider for how to go about replacing the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal. And then the left-hand side here is all the criteria that Dave showed a few minutes ago on the slide. And we put it all together into a screening matrix. And what you can see is the red means that there's a low likelihood that that alternative would meet that criteria, would have the ability to meet the criteria. The yellowish orange color is medium likelihood. And then the green is there's a high likelihood that it could meet that criteria. All these alternatives that are grayed out here on the far right are the alternatives that were suggested to move the terminal away from its existing location. Some of the ideas we've heard over the years are moving it somewhere else in Lincoln Park, moving it to Loman Beach, just north of Lincoln Park, shutting down the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal entirely and moving it to Coleman Dock, or merging it in with Coleman Dock in downtown Seattle, moving somewhere else in Elliott Bay, like over by the West Seattle Water Taxi or Terminal 5 area, moving it to Burien or moving to Des Moines. Those are all some ideas that had been tossed out there over the years. And through the screening process, those had 3 or more red squares showing 3 or more issues that had a low likelihood of meeting our criteria. So we have screened out those alternatives. The ones that are green are the ones we're going to carry forward into the next level of study and kind of flesh out those alternatives and study them in more detail as we further develop them and develop new criteria and work more with the community. So that's really where we're at right now, is focusing on alternatives that keep the terminal in the existing location in Fauntleroy. And then as the green across the top shows, there's many different variations on the terminal, keeping it the same size as it is today and adding a good to go fare processing system or some sort of advanced ticketing to sort of better manage traffic arriving at the terminal, replacing the same size dock with different ways of holding vehicles along Fauntleroy Way, 2-lane holding or 2-directional holding. So Southworth and Vashon traffic would approach from 2 different directions, using a remote holding lot somewhere else further up Fauntleroy Way, or building a bigger dock, 124 car dock or 186 car dock that would allow more vehicles to wait down on the dock. So that's where we're at today. And before I take some questions, I just wanted to point out, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have community meetings coming up next week, as well as an online open house that will be live from May 18th through June 13th. That's a sort of static online presentation that you can click through and read much more detail about all the information Dave and I just shared, and then leave comments and questions through an online feedback form. So we're at a point right now where we're going to sort of pause our project planning and get community input and share it with the project team before we move on much further. And then, as Dave mentioned, we've been meeting quite closely with 3 advisory groups, one of which is a community advisory group that has representatives from Vashon, Southworth, and Fauntleroy. We have a technical advisory group, which is staff from our agency partners and transit agencies and the environmental agencies, and then an executive advisory group made up of executives and elected officials from the 3 communities. So I think with that, I'm going to pause and I'll let you open it up for questions, David. And then here is our website and an email address that is always available for anybody who wants to share comments or thoughts with us.
Okay. If you have a question, please indicate by raising your hand in reactions. That's the easiest way for me to see you. Now, one thing at the community meetings early on, it was mentioned that there's going to be a focus on separating the car loading from the passenger loading. I didn't see that mentioned in your 7 alternatives. Is that still an emphasis in your various alternatives? Hadley?
Yes, well, so excuse me, we don't have the graphics of the alternatives up here today. Those are be in the online open house, but what you're referring to is what's called overhead loading, so that the walk-ons load the ferry at the same time that the cars are loading. And that is a concept that we're carrying forward that could apply to any of those alternatives. And we'll study it as something that could be added with any one of those different dock sizes or different alternatives.
Because in terms of efficiency of loading, I know it's been said that that makes a tremendous difference. Okay. Okay. Other questions, folks? Or looks like people seem fairly well satisfied. I know that the changing the location to, I guess, Loman Beach or to another part of the park, Fauntleroy, was considered as a way of making it easier to transition, but apparently those alternatives have been eliminated.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, like any alternative, there's pluses and minuses, and they're just dealing with the it's called Section 4F. It's a federal process in order to actually take public park or recreational areas and use them for a transportation facility is extremely difficult and challenging. And then the connections with the bus routes made it more problematic, where we wouldn't be able to get people from those points on the beach up to Fauntleroy Way easily. So there's just a lot of, moving the terminal is just very difficult, in addition to needing right of way and changing the flow of traffic through the neighborhood. A number of those alternatives kind of fell off the page.
Okay, now are you making an effort to coordinate with transit? Because I know for many, many, many years, Metro would have buses that would just spectacularly miss the ferry boats by a minute, 30 seconds. So all these bus riders would come running down the dock, waving, and then, the boat goes off. And so there was no real effort to communicate between Metro and State Ferries in terms of scheduling buses. Is there going to be an effort this time?
Well, in terms of this project, King County Metro and Kitsap Transit both have multiple representatives on our technical advisory group, and they have executive level representation on our executive advisory group. So they've already been very, very involved and will continue to be involved.
Well, good.
And some of the criteria that you saw up there that Dave mentioned on multimodal connections and the importance of integrating transit came from them originally in their comments, and they'll continue to be involved as we develop these alternatives.
Okay.
Looks like Diane had a question, Hadley. I think we can certainly share copies of this presentation.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I did email you the presentation, Diane, and you're welcome to post it on your website or include it with the minutes of the meeting. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be having this type of information, but much more detail is on the project website, and will be on an online open house starting Wednesday.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us and keeping us up to speed on this important project. Oh, I see Wendy Ammon.
Yes, I just had a quick question. Well, actually, a question and a comment. I'm wondering the weight of the Fauntleroy community versus, it's a small portion of the community that live adjacent to this particular dock, how much weight they have in the decision-making process versus the entirety of the Vashon Southworth community. And that was my question. And number two, I would hope that there is more, I just hope that there is a stronger emphasis on the selection of timing and ferry routes and schedules as you move forward in this process, because currently living in a world of only 2 ferries in the Vashon community, you have so many problem areas. For instance, the 8:45 and 9 a.m. ferry it's never on time, because it's just I just hope that you pay attention to those types of things as you move forward in this process. Thank you.
Thanks, that's helpful, Wendy. And just to answer your question about balancing the input of the different communities, that's an excellent point and something that we knew would be challenging going in. So that's why we've set up this fairly extensive advisory group process. So we have 26 members of our community advisory group that come from all 3 communities, and we've been working really hard. I mean, that's actually fairly sort of deliberately and somewhat slowly in the early stages to get that group working well together so that all of the input is balanced and all the perspectives can be weighed from the ferry riders and those of you dependent on this ferry to the neighbors in West Seattle. And we also have representation from beyond the Fauntleroy immediate neighborhood, because this does affect the rest of the West Seattle Peninsula too. And then Southworth and South Kitsap County is well represented too.
And when is the summer schedule coming back into effect for Vashon? Do you know?
Well, summer sailing schedule begins June 19th. As you know, we're currently on our alternate service plan that started in October. We've begun to restore service system-wide. We have 3 routes that have been restored to full service, and we're working our way down the list based on crew availability. So we've restored service to the Anacortes San Juan Islands route, the Seattle Bainbridge route, and the Mukilteo Clinton route. The next one, once we have adequate levels of crew to provide reliable service, will be Edmonds Kingston. They're currently on a 1-boat schedule now. They'll go to 2 boats. And then after that would be Fauntleroy Vashon Southworth. So we just need to make sure that our crew levels can come up to the level that we can sustain reliable service. And then we'll begin going back to those pre-pandemic schedules.
So we're at the bottom of the list?
You're sort of in the middle. So Edmonds
Oh,
Kingston's
okay.
next, then the Triangle, then Seattle Bremerton,
Okay,
then Port Townsend Coopville.
all
And then
right.
at the very bottom is their international route to Sydney. So they're unlikely to see any international service at all this year.
Okay,
So we're just, we have what's called our service restoration plan. It's posted on our website. It's kind of featured right in the middle of the Washington State Ferries website if anyone wants to read it. Every 2 weeks, we put out a progress report that details all the metrics we're using to slowly restore service, and looking at our progress hiring crew members in our different credentialed positions and our service reliability. Our goal is to kind of be able to provide reliable service, even if it's not as frequent, so that when we do restore it, you can count on it rather than bringing back 3 boats and then having to cancel them all the time.
okay. All right, because I had been told, or I thought I'd been told, that they were trying to get 3 boats back in May, but now the number is June 19th.
Well, June 19th is when our summer schedule typically starts. We don't have a date for when we'll restore to 3-boat service on the Triangle. As I
Okay.
mentioned, it's sort of an ongoing process based on crew availability and vessel availability, and when we have
Okay.
adequate staffing. The real constraint right now is having enough crew to meet our Coast Guard required crew limits.
And is there a major push on recruiting at this point?
Yes, we've been doing a lot of recruiting, a lot of hiring, a lot of training to train some of our crew to move up through the ranks so that they can take on those licensed positions. There's efforts on all levels, workforce development.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for coming out and making the presentation, Hadley and David. We appreciate the information and your expertise on the subject.
Okay, well, we're happy to come back anytime as this progress continues.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. And next on our agenda, I guess next you would say would be old business. We don't have any. And then we have committee updates. So I know that our committee chair for the Affordable Housing Committee is not in town right now. He's away, but on our Equity Committee, Kevin Jones is here for a brief report.
Thank you, David. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, announcements that everybody needs to know about. Rachel is the liaison between the board and the committee. I am the committee chair, as you just mentioned. That was determined at the board meeting prior to this meeting and at the committee meeting prior to this meeting. Our next meeting of the committee is on June 1st. People are very welcome to attend. What we are focusing on is the draft of the charter that we've discussed in a couple of different meetings now. My understanding is Rachel will be coordinating that with the board, as I am coordinating that with the committee, and we hopefully will find common statement of committee's scope and purpose. Looking ahead, the number of questions regarding operating procedures, but also clarity about how exactly we'll move forward to satisfy the content of the charter statement once we have that finalized. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Okay. Any questions?
Or I invite Rachel to add any comments if she might choose.
Okay. I don't see any hands raised. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for that presentation, and congratulations on being elected chair. And let's see, moving on, the next item on our agenda is whether community, there's no new business, but with regard to community updates, I would like to make a brief statement on my communications with the post office on Vashon. And in the past few months, the post office has done a horrific job in terms of supplying packages to people's homes. I know that the last 4 packages that I've received from the post office were left alongside a long driveway so that you could only find them if you know to look for them, but they could certainly be ruined by the weather. And I've heard that from a lot of people around the island. So in all the years, you know, I've been on Vashon, I complained to the post office for the first, second, and third times. And I was told, please bear with us. We're grossly understaffed. And at one point, they hadn't gotten the go-ahead to make new hires. But I talked to a management person at the post office today who told me they have the authorization now to make new hires at the post office, and they are, you know, trying to find 6 or 7 new postal workers, which would change this problem dramatically. I mean, it's understaffing that's the issue, and if we had 6 or 7 new hires, the post office would not be understaffed, and we would get adequate service, which we're not getting right now. So if any people know anyone who would like to apply for a job with a post office, you know, it can be a good career. And a lot of people on the island have made it into a good career. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in going and trying to get the job, because it's available. So often we hear, oh, there are no jobs available. Well, a postal worker job, 6 or 7 of them are available on Vashon. So please get the word out. Okay. Any comment on the postal service? Okay. The next meeting is going to be Monday, June 20th. And so I would like to, at this point, adjourn the meeting of the Vashon-Maury Island Community Council and turn the gavel, so to speak, over to Diane.
Thank you, David. Where's my gavel? I gotta have a gavel.
I used to have a gavel. I don't know what happened to it.
Okay. Yes, welcome everybody. This is the update meeting of the interim Vashon-Maury Community Council. And if some of you are wondering what's this all about, we are recreating the council as a 501c4 organization so that we can do lobbying efforts and not just be a typical 501c3. So we're in the process right now of having both organizations in existence as we do this. And so as part of that, we have drafted a new set of bylaws for the 501c4 organization and standing rules. And those have been, we've been getting input from the community for the past over a month. And we've posted the latest version on the website and sent it twice to our mailing list. And now it is time to discuss those documents and take a vote on them. So I'm opening the floor to discussion and questions about the bylaws and the standing rules.
A point of order, Diane.
Yes.
Kevin? Oh, sorry.
Let's see. In the absence of a quorum, are we going to proceed to vote?
Yes, we are. And the reason that we're going to proceed with a vote is because this is an advisory vote. When an organization, a new 501 organization is formed, it's the interim board which creates the bylaws for the new organization. In effect, we don't have members yet until the board accepts and solidifies the new bylaws, which create the members. So anybody who's here, whether you're a member of VMICC or interested party, everybody gets to vote on these. And it's more input from the community to the board. Okay, anyone else have any questions, any hands up, any chats about it? Yes, Kevin, your hand's up again.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to cede the floor to others, but I do have a few items. The first one regarding the bylaws, Article 2, Section 2 has local environmental issues. I'm wondering if the board would consider adding climate issues and doing so without the local caveat.
Let me let me share my screen and pull that up. Article 2, Section 2 in the bylaws, is that right?
Correct. And Section 2 is the scope, I believe. Or focus, yeah. And second line in the second paragraph under Section 2.
Right here, local environmental issues.
Oftentimes, the reason that I ask is that oftentimes environment and climate are viewed as similar, and oftentimes people will read environment and think, oh, climate belongs there. But local climate issues is sort of a non sequitur because we all live in the same climate. So the concern that I have is that local environmental issues, I think, is clear, but if climate is also considered a subset of environment, then local climate issues is, in my view, nonsensical. So I would ask the board consider adding climate issues to help distinguish and remove the
right after
possibility. After or before, yes. Thank you. If you want.
I'm just going to highlight that. I'm just going to highlight that for
as a suggestion.
As a suggestion.
Yeah, and I have a concern, Kevin, if I may say something. The community council only has real, if you would call it authority, but impact on local issues. We cannot really speak to what the state will do, what the country will do. We would just be spitting in the wind, essentially, to do that, whereas we can affect how we deal with these things on a local basis. So if we're, say, dealing with a coal burning plant that's going to be in Tacoma, that's a local issue because it will affect the island. But if you're dealing with something in Eastern Washington, coal burning plants, I don't know that the community council is the proper forum for that.
I have a significantly different view of that, and I'm happy to get into that, explain my rationale
Sure,
if you'd like,
sure.
but it depends on
Please.
how much time you want to use.
Oh,
Okay, thank you. So just a few months ago, the council, the VMICC, passed a motion regarding unincorporated King County Building Code change to move away from fossil gas for climate and space heating. And the very purpose of the people who are advocating for those changes within unincorporated King County and also at the state level is very much driven by climate issues. And so I would say that there's a tremendous number of local climate issues. We heard just today about sea level rise for the Fauntleroy Dock replacement.
right.
And so in that sense, I think climate issues are not something that is somewhere else. I think climate issues in my mind are very relevant to us here.
Right, but
so
what I'm
Kevin,
saying,
Does that make climate change a local environmental issue?
Nick, I appreciate that assessment, but what I'm afraid of is that people will look at the existing language and make an argument that climate change is a global issue, not a local issue, much along the lines of, I think, what I perceive from David's logic. But maybe I'm reading too much into it, David.
Yeah, I think you read too much into
the fact that this says such as housing. It doesn't say exclusively environmental issues. It says such as building code zonings. It's not excluding climate issues necessarily. It's just giving examples. We can't anticipate all of the issues that might happen. And I think that if we were to anticipate all of them, we'd be here forever. And this is just, we may in the example that David gave, we may include that or we may not. The word such as is just an example of what we would use, not everything, because it's not exclusive.
Yeah, and to say that we do not have local climate issues is not at all what I was saying, Kevin. I think we can certainly have a local effect on climate issues, and we need to do what we can to affect change where we can on local climate issues. But if we're going to be talking about climate issues in general, then I think that's beyond our purview. So I would just say local environmental issues includes local climate issues, as Nick was suggesting. I can't say that climate and environment are two separate things.
I don't think they are two separate things either.
Yeah, so I'm not, I wouldn't be inclined to say, add that as another thing. I would say local environmental issues, which would subsume local climate issues. And there are climate issues, say there was a burn ban on Vashon.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate clarifying. I misunderstood where you were taking that, David.
Sure. Okay.
I'm going to leave it in there for our board discussion.
Okay.
Just for now.
Yeah, and I will just say again that I've done a lot of work in the climate area, and I oftentimes will run into this hair splitting between what's local, what can we do locally, and climate is a bigger problem. It's really not a local issue. And so this is a measure of protection for those who would like to not get into that debate. But of course, that's just a recommendation for the board to consider.
Okay.
Did you have any others, Kevin?
None in the standing rules, none in the bylaws, but some in the standing rules.
Okay. Can you tell us about the standing rules?
Sure, if there's no other comments. Okay. Let's see, regarding liaisons, and I know Diane, you and I had this back and forth in the Google Doc version of the standing rules. I really appreciate the sort of philosophy of sectors. I'm in section 3, liaisons is where I'm commenting now. So I think it's extremely important that the board or the council somehow be representative of the island. And by the way, I'm speaking as an individual council member now, not as anything to do with the equity committee, just to be clear. So I think it's critically important that representation is built into the documents. And while I'm sure there may be some comments about sectors, I've heard a couple of comments, I won't repeat them here, about whether the list is inclusive. The thing that I had recommended, Diane, and you and I had talked about this, is that I think it's very important that every defined sector have a board member who is a liaison with that sector. And I'll just simply say that the way the standing rules are written now, every board member could become, say, a liaison to culture and history and leave all the other sectors without a liaison. That's, I think, allowable if you read the words literally. And I think that that's not the intent. And I think it's very important that, you know, if the language I'm recommending that, which reads something like every sector should have or must have a board member liaison, maybe with exception for vacancies on the board, that assures that there's no one group on Vashon who is feeling that or is actually left out of the considerations by the council.
That makes sense. What does it say?
It says that each board member will serve as a liaison to one or more of the following sectors. I don't know how, I'm not sure we'll be able to force people to do this, Kevin. And I'm reluctant to force people to do something that they don't want to do as volunteers for this organization. David?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Diane. I think that you can always make it suggestive and do it as a, you know, a goal to achieve, but saying that you must do that can cause more harm than good at times. You know, forcing too many requirements on people, but I certainly think we should encourage it.
Shouldn't it be in the information that we have later about the organization, the committees themselves? Each committee shall, and where am I looking?
These were not committees. These aren't committees, Hunter.
I see.
These are sectors, yeah.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
We could say something, striving to have all sectors covered, something like that.
Yeah.
Without forcing it and requiring people to do it.
Maybe what you could say, the purpose is to have board members connect with all these sectors.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes.
With the purposes.
The purpose is to have the board members connect.
Include all these sectors, because I agree, you can't force people to say, I want to be in faith, and they're not interested at all in it or food. I don't know if I'd like to be in food. I don't like to cook.
Exactly. But by saying that this is the purpose, connect with all the sectors, it's
the endeavor.
And the meaning behind it. And when we have, as a board, when we look at these sectors that are in our standing rules, we have worked hard to make sure that they are all covered. So to say that the board is going to just ignore them and not do it, I think is unrealistic. And I think that having it here, rather, the purpose is to have the board members connect with all these sectors to understand their issues and needs and encourage participation in council meetings. I like that suggestion very much, David. And we'll put it in here for now, and we'll discuss it as a board. I'm just going to highlight this.
Okay, great.
So that we can discuss it again at our board meeting. But thank you very much for raising that, Kevin. And making it more clear that what our intent is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have another comment in the same section.
Okay.
I think it would be very well. Let's see. One of the comments that motivates this line of thinking is that in talking to community leaders before I got very involved in the council, somebody raised the question along the lines of, how is it that a self-nominated group of people will create this thing called a council and somehow make it representative of the Vashon-Maury Islands? Clearly somebody who's concerned about the mechanics, if you will, of this liaison and this representation. Clearly, more people participating is a step in the right direction. I'm not saying that I hold that view. I'm saying that that view has influenced some of my thinking. So just for some background. I would think it would be helpful if each of the liaisons for each sector would create, update, and annually publish, in accordance with privacy considerations, a directory of sector individuals, groups, and group leaders with whom they liaise.
I'm a little lost. Can you give me an example of what you mean? I'm sorry to be so loud.
No problem. For example, in the environment area, for example, the whole Vashon project says there's 32 different groups on Vashon Island that have either whole or partial environment in their mission statement or their goals and objectives. I think the number is probably lower than that, but what it means is there's a tremendous amount of groups that Diane, you're currently the liaison with environment. I think it's important to understand the nature and the scope of how big that sector is on Vashon and who do you liaise with, for example. And so I think it was helpful as just a process to understand, when we say food, what does that mean? When we say faith, we know who the churches are. That's probably fairly easy. When we see LGBTQ+, who are those folks that we communicate with? And I think it would be helpful not only for the board to be clear about, here's the community members that I want to stay in touch with, but I think it would also be helpful when people say, how are we staying in touch with these groups that are with that sector? There would be some physical evidence, if you will, that says, here's the list of people that we try to stay in touch with on a regular basis. I know that's a lot of work. So I suspect there's a fair amount of consideration for that idea, but I did want to put it out there.
Thank you, Kevin.
So Kevin,
did that answer the question, Hunter?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
So Kevin, so annual report from board members on their sectors and how they have reached out to them.
Yes, and I'll put in chat some words that you can borrow from if you like. So for your consideration, of course. And there's only one more comment I have on the standing rules.
Okay.
This has to do with amendments to the standing rules.
Yes.
Currently, I believe as the rules are written, the only consideration for changing the rules is if and only if the board has approved in advance a change to the rules.
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to add a provision that says that that the council has an opportunity to bring an amendment to modify the standing rules, regardless of what the board's decision on whether a standing rule update has been approved by the board or not. I don't know if I run into state law problems with that.
I think you do run into state law problems with that,
Okay.
actually,
Okay.
because it's the board that has the responsibility and the liability for running the organization. And it's entirely possible that the members could request and pass something to the standing rules that is illegal. And that's one of the key reasons why it needs to go through the board first. Because the community isn't aware and would not typically know all the laws that affect nonprofits right now. They wouldn't have that memorized, and it would be very easy for the community to propose this, and we wouldn't be able to do it, which wouldn't look good, wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be a good way to approach things.
Yeah, it's not a reasonable obligation that the council members would understand the Washington state law regarding incorporation. So,
right.
Okay. I think it's helpful, and I know there's always good intent, and I respect that and believe that that is part of what the process is, given the people who typically would be involved and be on the board. In the event of, one of the reason that I mention this is that my leadership training always contains the notion that leadership is fallible and always subject to error. And it's important that we recognize that and create other provisions for correcting leadership errors. Operating
well, that's why we have a
rooms.
whole board and not just one person doing this.
Well, but boards can be wrong too, is the point. And so providing a pathway for the broader council, which is ultimately, I believe, the authority when it comes to things like democratic rules of order, making sure that they have a pathway if they have a disagreement with the board's conclusions, that they have a chance to voice those.
They certainly
And
can at any time.
Yeah, and very good. And so I think there's probably the possibility of having motions and straw votes, things like that, right? That can express the community's opinion. So
Yes.
I think those are good
Yes.
adjuncts that would be those are similar mechanisms to the one that I had in mind here. So I feel comfortable with that.
Yes, the meetings of the members people can raise issues and we can discuss issues, and a vote wouldn't be able to be taken that would bind the board. But absolutely, these things are to be discussed openly and freely about how it all should work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just want to say in closing,
in a meeting can make suggestions to the board.
yes. Okay. And I just want to say in closing that, sharing some feedback that I've received from community leaders, I do that because those are feedback is a gift in that sense, that it helps us understand what other people are perceiving so that we can adjust and make sure that we are moving in a direction that removes people's fears and concerns. So I hope you'll understand the motive that I have for sharing some of that information.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin, for being so careful.
Yeah, and thank you, Diane, for putting so much work into these standing rules and bylaws.
Okay, are there any other questions, or can we take our vote now? Any other questions from anybody, or shall we go ahead and take the vote? So Nick, is it possible to do a poll, or shall we just do a raising of hands?
Let's just raise hands since we didn't set anything up.
Okay. So the wording of the motion is: we move to adopt these proposed bylaws and standing rules. All those in favor? Raise your hand with reactions. And if you can't figure that how to do that, then just do it like in the video. And everybody here can vote, Bon.
Okay.
Okay, well, Nancy, we're taking a vote on the bylaws and standing rules. If you'd like to weigh in by raising your hand, either with the reactions or thank you very much. Okay, very good. Then we've gotten feedback from the folks who've hung in there long enough, who care enough about things like bylaws and standing rules, that they've met with your approval with the caveats.
Point of
that
order.
Kevin has said. Yes, Kevin?
Yeah, point of order. Were you going to call for a vote against the people who are not supporting the current rules?
Sure. How many people who are here do not support the proposed bylaws and standing rules?
Just
As written, I cannot support them at this time.
Okay. Anyone else?
Do we have any abstentions?
I think we have Bong has not voted. I don't think Steve McDonald has voted.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. So that's that. Thank you very much for that input to the board on the bylaws and the standing rules. Is there any other discussion anyone else would like to add or raise this evening before we move on? Yes, Nancy Lee. You'll need to unmute yourself.
I was just very concerned about the hate crime that happened with Mika's Kitchen. And I just see that there's been no container for this discussion this evening. I was concerned as a owner of a Black business in downtown Vashon, very frightened, very concerned, and just wondering if we can create space for that perhaps next time. That gentleman is still walking the streets.
Yeah, and
not in jail.
If I may speak to that, Nancy, when Major Horford was here, who I guess is in charge of Precinct 4, he asked that Mika call or direct to his attention the fact that this should be looked at as a hate crime, and that he would then pass that on to the prosecutor's office. So there was some discussion about it, and it was a horrendous thing. And so Mika, I thought, made her case very well, that even though he didn't put any, words at the scene, if you combine his Facebook page and the intent that was clearly shown by what he did there, that you could make this into a hate crime.
Yes.
And having previously been a King County prosecutor, I think this could be prosecuted as a hate crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, he's still walking the streets, and
yeah, you can't, until you get an investigation to a crime, you only have 72 hours to hold someone when they're arrested, and if they're not charged, then they have to be released. And sometimes these cases take a while to develop and investigate, and so they just wait until they have enough resources together to file a charge, at which point he can be held and the bail can be made higher.
I would just like to add that had he been a Black man, he would have been in jail now.
Or shot, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think
horrible.
Yeah. No, it's just false to think that the law is colorblind.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin? Oh, sorry, Diane.
Yeah,
I
I-
apologize.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think I fully support Nancy, your request that we make space for that discussion. It was brought up in the meeting today, of course. I think that unless, my thought would be that unless bringing that up in subsequent meetings of the council somehow interferes with law enforcement, I think that it would be very helpful that a status report be provided, if that's possible, to continue following what is happening regarding the apparent hate crime, alleged hate crime.
It just seems to me that this should have just been something that would have been really looked at much quicker. In the interim, what keeps me safe from being a business owner that's Black in Vashon?
Oh,
Where should I leave?
oh, no.
But do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah.
What keeps me safe? What protects me?
Those are totally
Nothing.
right.
Yeah.
In my opinion, totally rational questions and very appropriate to ask. And that's why I want to make sure that I think it makes sense for us to continue to add this as an agenda item and keep tabs on what is happening.
Yeah,
And there may
I
be
think-
additional developments that would help answer some of those broader questions that Nancy's raising.
Nancy, it may be good to ask Major Horford for an update next month to see what has been done in terms of prosecuting this as a hate crime. And I can't say that I know the facts of the incident, from all different sides, how it's been investigated, what steps are being taken. I'm on the outside now, so I don't know.
This is
It hasn't been investigated yet. It hasn't even been assigned to an investigator. Nothing's been done.
That's just, it's unconscionable and it's wrong.
But Nancy, when you think about it, it is wrong and it's unconscionable, but there are situations where a woman is targeted by a man who knows this person, who breaks into her house, who does bad things, and then that person is just out for a time until an investigation can be done. So, justice is not as swift as we would like in many cases, but I agree with you.
I'm a 64-year-old Black woman. I've seen some things. I'm from the South, and I know what you say is true. Justice, the arc of justice bends slowly, but this is too slow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I worked for a judge down in Montgomery, Alabama, so I know, a bit about it myself. And when I was there, it seemed like it was open season on Black men running across the street, there were several who were shot during my tenure down there. Yeah.
So Nancy, you're asking, sorry, please, Hunter.
I was just wondering if I was trying to find the GoFundMe for Mika's, and somebody asked me about it. Does anybody have the reference to that? There was a.
I have to find it, but it is here.
Oh, okay. And Kyle just posted a phone number and an email for the victim advocate for hate crimes. So this might, Nancy, if you see that in the chat,
okay,
that looks like someone we should be contacting and asking for follow-up.
And if I could speak for a moment just to that, Nancy, they spoke at our meeting, the meeting just like 2 weeks before this incident occurred. They spoke at our general meeting here and even shared some of these issues. And this individual, Erik Gray, that I put in the listing, they shared their email and phone number. They encouraged us to call them as well for follow-up in these sort of matters. And I encourage you to reach out to them as well, or feel comfortable reaching out to them. And if you need any support in that, let us know. I know that's a small thing, like, oh, here's a thing, but it's one other piece, and they did directly communicate with our community that they want to support as they can within this. So I feel that they're a good resource. I've worked with them in other fashions. I personally have not had the chance to address this with them. This last month's been pretty busy for me too. Mika and Nancy both, we're here with you, and I'm glad this conversation is happening.
Thank you very much for bringing it up, Nancy.
Thank you. I just, I don't know, but I'm nervous, and
No, we should follow up on it. And
Okay.
that's how you get things done, is you don't ask once, you ask 3 times,
okay.
you know? It's like the garbage cans for Vashon Town. We've been talking about that for a year, and you just have to keep asking to get a reaction. Now, this is more serious for sure, but it's the same way when you're working with a bureaucracy. You have to keep asking, what's happening now? You know, when are we getting a follow-up on this? That sort of thing.
My observation is just simply that coming from the South, there's just more things in place than being here in Vashon. There's just not things in place that should be in place here yet. And I want to be part of that as an African American. And the island has a terrible history, of obviously keeping Black folks and people, BIPOCs, out, because you can feel it when you walk through the streets. I guess I'm talking too much on an emotional level. I'm sorry. I don't know.
No, absolutely. That's what open discussion's all about. Whatever is on people's minds, whatever is worrying them, whatever is concerning them, that's one of the key purposes of this organization, is to hear these things and see what we can do.
I've been a business owner for 35 years, and I have never been this afraid to have a business in my whole life as when I came to Vashon. And it's like it's, to me, the energy is that white folks, and this is not against you directly, can pay somebody off or make a donation, and it makes you kind of feel better. But the real advocacy work comes from putting your foot forward and making these changes and putting them as law. That white boy should not be walking the streets or be so deeply entrenched in the necessity of public service or community service that it would be pitiful. And his Facebook page shouldn't be up. Why is his Facebook page up about Black Lives Matter, and the way to rid of it is for white people and white police officers to kill Black people? That's what's on his page as far as the answer to BLM. This is not acceptable.
Nancy,
just not acceptable.
What we could do is just communicate with Major Horford that, although you had not discussed this when he was talking, that afterwards it came up that there are Black business owners on the island who are afraid for their businesses. And so we need to get updates on what's being done.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Even if there's 2 of us, there's Dre with Gravy and Peppa,
right?
And me.
Right.
And Michaella, she's Mexican, but
right.
He targeted her. So I'm sorry, I'm getting redundant now.
No, it's an emotional issue.
I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous.
Yeah.
I've never felt like this in my life.
Yeah.
Nancy, I don't know your business. Could you share with us what
Sure. I have a massage therapy practice at the Chamber building right across the street from the library. It's called Studio 1212 Therapeutic Massage and Body Work. And I just feel like a big old fat target.
Nancy, the reason I have my hand up is that, and I
Yes.
think you've already mentioned this, that you had mentioned earlier, what's going to happen to keep us safe. And then you mentioned that there's things that are not in place here. I don't know, that tells me that you could share with us or share with law enforcement some of the things that are missing here that would make you feel safer. Is that a true conclusion?
Absolutely. I sit on a Wise Woman Council group of advocates for social and race equity, and I've been sitting on it for 2 years. It's out of Durham, North Carolina. And yeah, I could share something. I really, really could. You guys share some things that need to be in place.
We need to
in the
know them,
country.
Nancy Lee.
Okay.
I would like to hear as well. And I don't know to what extent, we as individuals could be helpful. Perhaps that's part of what might be in your mind, but we can certainly also set expectations about our community, and to what extent that will change behaviors, we don't know, but that's a step we can all take, in my personal view. And we can certainly advocate for some of those items because it's not just you, right? There's not just one person or two people or even three people. When people are at risk, everybody's at risk. The potential grows. And we're seeing, and I can't be where you're at, but I can understand where you might be. We are seeing now, just in the last 72 hours, two incidents which are now linked to hate crimes. And so to believe that this is a trend that's on the decline is not a reasonable expectation. And I hope that doesn't incite fear. But I think it just that we have to be very realistic and take this very seriously.
Thank you. And it does incite fear. It really does. That's what hate crimes are all about.
Exactly right.
I've lived with them all my life, and that's what they're all about. They're to incite fear. And the browning of America is happening, and some white folks just are very, very, very angry that is so.
That is very true.
Thank you.
So, yes. So, I'm happy to understand how I can be helpful. And as I don't know if you heard the entire, we do have an equity committee on the island. We're still trying to determine our scope and exactly what the group does. We have a number of folks who are very open to hearing how that equity committee can be helpful and be in touch with all of the elements of our community. That's one of the reasons why I didn't speak as an equity committee member. That's why the notion of sectors on Vashon becomes such a pivotal element, I think, of our work. That's my personal view. We'll see what the committee says. But more than happy, if you'd like to hear more about the equity committee, I'd be happy to share my contact information and email with you if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be maybe how I can start, because I feel like I'm kind of a bridge between north, south, east, west a little bit personally, and I want to be that bridge without being targeted.
Yeah.
We
Thank
have
you so much for
we have
sharing your story. It was really gutsy and very articulate with your emotions. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
Sharing it. Opening our eyes to it is terrible. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Well, I did just want to mention that while there's, the equity committee is just now entering a formal phase with the committee chair and so on, there have been members have talked to other people in our community, and the notion that one of the themes that comes forward is wanting to be able to hear and understand all of the different communities within Vashon and Maury Islands. And not all of those community members feel comfortable being known and being discoverable. And so it could very well be that we've some have mentioned that there's perhaps a third party who would be in touch with certain members of the community, and they don't have to become known to the equity committee. I don't know to what extent, we could apply. I mean, protections are important. And to what extent people feel comfortable but still engaged is, I think, a question that we need to answer as a committee. I'm not speaking for the committee. I definitely want to have that conversation with the committee. Anyway, my contact information is in the chat. I hope that you feel free to give me a call or an email, and any time of day, any day of the week between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., you can give that number a call.
You're Kevin. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, and
Yes.
Nancy, I just wanted to mention that I just typed up an email to Major Konoske, and said, Major Konoske, after you left our meeting, Nancy Lee, a Black business owner on Vashon, expressed her concern and her fear about running a business on the island when the Nazi sympathizer who committed this heinous act against Mika's Kitchen is still at large. Would you please update the VMICC on what is being done regarding this hate crime? Thank you.
Like tomorrow. They can do it tomorrow.
Well, I just want to let you know that that's already sent out.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to just add, I'm sorry, Kyle. I just wanted to add real briefly that there is a Black organization or a group of us. I call them the melanin people because I don't know what else to call them. But anyway, but they're together. There's 40 or 50 of us, BIPOC and Black, and we get together and we're trying to figure out so many things. Like there's no census, for example, for us with housing on the island. How can that be? I just have never seen anything like that. But anyway, we're getting together and we're trying to figure out how we can help each other, because how can we expect you all to help us when we don't know how to help ourselves first? So we're trying to move forward. We're doing some things,
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And so, Nancy, I just wanted to say that, of course, that kind of outreach is very powerful and heartwarming to hear that is happening on our islands, because I think that's super important. There are people in my network who might be able to introduce you to folks that you haven't discovered yet. So I'd be happy to share some information with you if that would help to bring that community together.
I just want to know that there are people with clout, that they can move things.
Some of these people have a lot of clout.
Okay, good. That's good. Thank you. I feel better a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Kyle, did you have to say something or?
Again, I guess I'm thinking about, well, I want to just like uphold and that we have to keep sharing these things. Sometimes people are afraid to voice what it is that they're afraid of, like for fear of retaliation or people brushing them off or something else. And that we've heard of the last series of meetings as well from law enforcement, the captain at the previous meeting made mention that a lot of people talk about things. This is not necessarily what we're talking about per se, but what this is leading to is that a lot of things get discussed, but then they don't necessarily get to the people who can like address those things, or they don't, like law enforcement doesn't necessarily receive some of these calls. Now, David just made a direct composite of a summary of what was stated here and then shared that. And Mika made message earlier directly and voiced it and has been making calls as well. But that Captain Volpe had mentioned that there's a lot of these discussions that happen about issues and calls don't get made. And they really need calls to be made, just like the sergeant said for Fish and Wildlife. If they don't know that these incidences are continuing to happen, or if that person that was mentioned that is continuing to walk around who's caused this harm, if they're doing anything that makes anybody feel fishy, call it in, describe it. If you don't feel safe yourself calling it in, ask if someone else nearby can feel safe to make a report or do an anonymous report, because that data helps to direct these movements to, if people want to go that route for law enforcement. Not everyone does, but in this case, it feels like that's one of the routes people are exploring within our capacity for exploring what public safety is to us, and to move this person who is causing this specific harm in a different capacity, or have them be addressed for their behaviors, their inappropriate and dangerous and unsafe behaviors.
Yes. And people don't recognize, Kyle, that racism is a mental health issue. So if you're schizophrenic and you do that, you are racist, period.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sorry, I'm like screaming at the choir here, but I just get so intense sometimes. Okay.
Well, I also have to say, Nancy, that we don't have many people of color on Vashon. That's been noticeably absent my entire stay here. And I think one of the things is that it takes a lot of courage for people of a different color to move to a place where they don't have a lot of friends, a lot of community there to support them. So I applaud you for doing that. And I've tried to do my own little recruitments here and there, and I'm still working on it, but it takes a lot of courage. And so, go ahead.
I was just going to simply say, I had this white woman tell me just a week ago that she was affluent and asked me if I owned or rented. And I looked at her and I said, well, actually, I own this island. And she said, what? I said, yeah, because we were here first. So anyway, just a little joke of a sidebar, but she wasn't very happy with the fact I said that. But I just see the herstory here in the island, that it was designed to keep us out. You can feel it when you walk the streets.
I don't think, I am not aware of that history. Yeah, although I know other communities where that is. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it kind of broke up a little bit. Tacoma is Tacoma. That's indigenous. It's really not Tacoma, it's Tacoma,
Right.
Seattle is an American name. The names say that, but there's been a real amazing undercover of really who was here first by how the names are the same, but they're pronounced differently even.
Oh, you should see in some places in this country, names are pronounced in a way that's, I think, purposefully derogatory. Like if you go down to California and you go to Paso Robles, which is pronounced Paso Robles.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Or Arroyo Grande, which is pronounced Arroyo Grande.
Thank you.
I mean,
or Santa Monica, that was a Black saint.
Right.
Santa Monica, Saint Monica.
Yeah.
Michaella, you have your hand up. Would you like to say something?
Yes, I would like to add something. I'm sorry, I'm laying down now. It's almost my nap time. I would like to say that with everything that's happened, I would like to say, Nancy, that the majority of Vashon, I would say that there's a few bad apples, but the majority of Vashon, I feel is definitely not racist. They are very supportive.
Yes.
And very, we're all people, we're all people, and there's a few bad people, but in general, I would say I love Vashon, and I think everyone's there. Yeah.
Thank you, Michaella. Thank you so much for saying that. It just takes one bad apple to ruin the whole thing.
Yep.
That's how fragile we all are.
Yep.
Okay, well, it's 9:30.
Oh,
a half hour past our meeting time, and I'm very glad that we've stayed to be able to have this conversation. It's critically important to all of us. And thank you very much, Nancy Lee, for bringing it up. And
And
we look
come
forward
back.
to hearing some of the ideas that you have and finding out more about what's missing, what's not in place that should be in place on the island. We don't know because it's fine for us, you see, but it's not fine for you, and we need to know why.
Right. Michaella, thank you so much for your courage. Can you hear me, Michaella?
Lisa.
Oh, yes.
She must have gone to sleep.
Wait a second. I hear you. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Okay, well,
Thank you so much.
good night, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Night.